So you never hear me badmouth any other person's amplifier. But if you go buy a Fender amp at Guitar Center today, in the $400 or $500 range, the signal caps are going to cost Fender 17, 18 cents. They're really good quality orange drop caps. And they do the job. I'm going to use an $18 to $20 signal cap. There's only 4 in the amp. There's other caps, but there's 4 caps in my amps that actually handle the delicate signal that your guitar or your steel sends into the amp. So I'm going to use the best possible ones. Anybody in here remember the big Macintosh stereo amps of the past? They're like $4,000 or $5,000. I'm going to use the same signal caps that Mac would use, and they're really top dollar stuff. Now, and they're all hand built by myself. And I'm going to tell you what I feel about too many tone knobs. You can have a low, a mid, a high. You can have a high cut, a mid shape. We did a show a year ago, my wife and the company next to us in the booth had an amp sitting there that had 23 knobs on the amp. If you offered me $100 a line, I couldn't think of enough things to put down to make 23 things that you would do to that amp. So let me tell you what my philosophy is on this. If Kyle gives me a cassette tape, I'll go back before CDs. If you give me a cassette tape, and I love it, and I make you a copy, and you make him a copy, and you make him a copy, by the time it gets to you, it's a little muddier than the one that you gave me. Well, think about it, guys. This amp right here, the 50 watt, this is exactly what Kyle plays when he's traveling with Chris Young on stage. This is the volume, so let's set the volume where we like it. And here's the tone. So if you turn the tone all the way to the right, that's what the amplifier sounds like. Okay? That's 100% of what the amplifier sounds like. This is a passive tone control. A passive tone control simply means it cannot add anything, but it just takes away. So in other words, if Kyle plugs into this and it's wide open, it's what the amp sounds like, and he thinks that's a little shrill, it's a little harsh, it's a little bit on the upper treble, he backs it off a little bit. What is he doing? He is grounding out the signal from his instrument to the chassis. He's throwing away some of the signal. That's okay though, because it was just a little bit high and a little trebly, okay? So, and I do that. I do that too. I don't know hardly anybody plays it wide open, and some people do, depending on your instrument, of course, and the room you're in. But my point is, we just lost some signal. So what if this amp has a low, a mid, and a high on it, and we back off a little bit of the low, and a little bit of the mid, and a little bit of the high? What we've done there is we've trimmed some of the AC signal from your instrument. We've cut back on some of it. And what you'll find in most amps, when there's a whole bunch of tonality adjustments, you'll find another tube in the back of that called a gain stage makeup. And what that means is we've just lost so much of the signal, adjusting the tone to suit us, that now we've got to boost that back up again. So what are we doing? We're taking that cassette that's been copied 3 times, now we're turning the volume up. So it's still muddy, but it's louder. So now I'm exaggerating, I'm trying to make a point. It's theory is what I'm talking about. So that's why I chose to go with a volume and a tone control. And I didn't know that it would work, I thought it would work. But when Reggie Young and Brent Mason and Vince Gill and these guys that are my heroes that have ears that I'll never have, when they say it works, then I agree, that's what I should do. So that's why, and then you'll see this amp here, the VG50, and I named that in honor of my buddy Vince. He toured with one of these for a year and kept beating on me. I get in a room that's woofy, and I don't have that high-end telly sparkle that I like. So we came up with a new tone stack to where the tone had a little bit higher. It would go a little higher, and there was a bass roll-off, so that if he gets in a room, a casino or somewhere in Indiana, and it's a little bit woofy, he can back some of that low frequency off. Yesterday, we had a guy with an L4, L100, what is the big old famous Gibson? L5. The guy pulls out a 1969 L5. Woo! It was beautiful. And it's like pulling a 55 Chevrolet tricked out into the parking lot. You know, everybody went, and he plugged it in, and those guitars tend to have a lot of that bottom end. So we rolled the bass roll off, and it dialed it right in. So that's the only third knob that you'll ever see on my amps has that. This is, when I met Paul Franklin, I was at the station inn. Vince Gill came to me and says, I let Paul play your amp the other day, and he is absolutely not quit talking about it. I want you to meet him. We got to talking. Paul loved it. He ordered a 50 watt, played it, just went nuts over it and said, and I'm not a steel player, guys, so bear with me. I guess it's a C6. Is the C6 the neck that's the lowest frequency? Would I be right on? Okay, so he said on his C6, he would, in the studio, in the amps he'd been using all his life, he could adjust it to where the bottom end was just, you know, he could adjust the tone to get it right. But then when he went up the neck, there was always a spot he hit that wasn't EQ'd right. And if he was going to be doing something mostly in the high, he would EQ it for the high. And what he liked about the Little Walter was that it tended to have an even equalization from the bottom end to the top end. And so I didn't know that the amp would be that good for steel until the steel players. Then Bruce Boughton and Tommy White and Kyle and Dan Galish and Travis Toy, the whole bunch of guys are now playing them, and I listen to them. Oh man, if Kyle calls me up and says, have you ever thought about, I'm writing notes, because that's how I have grown. And you ask anybody that uses my stuff, if you come up with an idea, I will listen to it. I can't guarantee I can do it, but I have built my company basically listening to the guys that play these, and if they think enough of me to give me an idea of what could make it better, that's exactly what I do. Anyway, back to Paul. When he plays with the Time Jumpers, the 50 was fine. When he plays with the Players, and I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about, the Players, and you may have heard them, they tend to be a little bit more volume-esque than the Time Jumpers. So he says, I need 2 of those. So I went home, and I'll be honest with you, I love everybody in our Little Walter family. Paul and I are I feel like he's a kindred spirit. Carol and I both feel that way about him. He's like, if he never even used my amps, we'd still love him. And I wanted to do something for him. So we built the Twin, which is 2 of the 50 watt, built on an 8.5 by 9 inch chassis, and these don't touch, so they're true stereo. But it's not that I was building a stereo amp, but they are true stereo. But the Franklin steel had 2 outputs on it, and that's what we built for him.